So, those of you who don't know, this is my boy Josh Thomas, aka TheBitBlock, WeFolder Josh, JT Shine, JT Style, uh, plenty of
Many
other
monikers.
names. Mayor Joshy goes
There
by
you
a lot
go.
of
That's
names.
the best.
Um,
That's the best.
Good friend of mine. He's been doing
Hello.
YouTube for what, like 10, 15 years?
Since 2006. I don't know how long that is. Nearly 20.
Oh my
Nearly
god.
20 years.
Holy shit. He's an
Shoot
OG.
me.
He's an OG. But we're going to be talking about Tears of the Kingdom. So, just want to preface this by saying I may or may not know someone that has the game and has been playing it early. And so, wanted to give our thoughts on this. Josh, I know in the past you did make a standalone video kind of talking about what are some of the features you're looking for in a sequel. And I think especially with a game that's so replayable like Breath of the Wild, a game that most of us that have played it probably have 80, 100 hours in that game. What is it that needs to be in this sequel to bring you back into that world? What is it that, you know, with it being the same engine, the same map, what are some of the key things for you?
Okay. I think in Breath of the Wild, I felt like it was a little short on the mini games and side quest stuff. I think I'd like to see a lot of that stuff set up throughout the map now, to where you just kind of come upon some NPC running a little game or something you can do. Definitely making a lot more use out of the map. Less open areas would be one thing for sure.
No,
That's a
mini games
main
for
one.
sure. I think compared to
Yeah.
the more traditional Zeldas, Breath of the Breath of the Wild, what did they have for mini games? It almost was like
Little
the shrines was like mini
mini
games kind
games.
of.
Yeah, there were some overworld ones where like a little snow bowling one where you knock down the moose pins.
You're right. You're right.
Like a shield sledding challenge. A lot of them were winter themed from what I can recall, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
you're right.
few, but there weren't many. But there weren't a lot, and I feel like they could do a lot more of that kind of stuff in the overworld.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially with having sort of like the abilities, like in the first one, they have the what do you call it? The bombs, the kind of like projection bombs you can just spawn in and throw, like things like that. I feel like they didn't really have any mini games involving those, or any of the like the Sheikah Slate powers. It was more like you said, like the shield surfing and like the little snowball things. Um, so yeah, I know that's one of them. And just to touch on this, I know in the past, I think a lot of people have had issues specifically with the frame rate, the technical side of Breath of the Wild.
Okay.
How willing do you think most people are to go back to an engine, go back to a game, a console maybe they touched 3-4 years ago, and play another 720p 30 fps game with frame drops? How willing are you specifically to go back and do that?
I mean, I kind of feel like I don't have any other choice, so it's sort of like I don't want that, I don't like that, and certainly doesn't do the game justice. It's like you have so many people working to make this game, and then at the end of the day, hardware doesn't really let what they created shine in the way that it should. So like I'm willing to do it, of course, because the other option is like what? Not play at all. But it is something that probably, the more I play Switch games nowadays, I kind of start to be like, man, this is not to par with the year 2023. So it might be something people notice more in this sequel than the original if they haven't made significant improvements to how it runs.
Yeah, and I still think it's crazy that probably up until May 12th, the original Breath of the Wild is still probably the most technologically advanced Switch game we've gotten. I mean, some other games, I know some specific games you don't like Luigi's Mansion 3. I'd put that up there. I think that almost sort of like the diorama look, and even with the little Zelda reboot they did for Link's Awakening, I think that's up there, just in terms of like the lighting with that. But man, 2023, and it's crazy just looking at the consoles now that most of them are 4K, 60 FPS, 1080p, 120 FPS. And then um, even just from playing the game, I will say it's 30 FPS, but it does have decent pacing. It's not as stuttery, that you don't notice as much in those grassier areas where there's a lot of those like single little threads of grass. When you're going through those and maybe dropping items, picking up items, fighting enemies, there's not as much drops as in the first game. I think it did get noticeable in the first game. I will say the physics abilities in this game do kind of tank the FPS, and that's kind of a bummer, especially how much they're sort of like putting that as like the forefront, like the new like flag feature of this game. I do think the way it is now, before maybe a patch, it's a little disappointing. So for sure, I agree with you there. I think I did see something today about already a day one patch.
Mm.
But yeah,
It's very weird to work on a game for so long and then like you have a day one patch. What, you couldn't figure that out in the 5 years you were making the game? It's kind of weird.
Right. No, I think the same thing, because clearly the game's been done. I mean, they have copies printed out there, obviously, that got whatever stolen by somebody and leaked online. There's physical copies of the game. The game's been printed, and now you're still working out the kinks. So
yeah, it also seems weird that like the main new feature is the thing that slows the game's frame rate down. That's not a good look. Like, imagine if in Mario Odyssey, every time you threw the hat, it made the frame rate dip a little bit. It's kind of like this is the whole key part of the game, and it destroys the game a little bit every time you do it. Or it's like, yeah. It's almost like I really hope Nintendo's developers are really starting to talk to the hardware team and being like, hey, it's harder for us to do our job because the hardware is not really doing what we need it to. So we have to spend all this extra time just trying to get things to work we could have spent with putting things into the game. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Hardware should work for the developer, and that way they don't have to waste so much time trying to get something to run decent.
And I also think I expected them to do like a Wii U Breath of the Wild, also co-releasing it on another platform. Like, I expected when they delayed this game, that was kind of a flag to me, like, oh, maybe they're going to come out with Switch 2 and they'll release it side by side and we'll get the inferior version on the older hardware, but then maybe on the new hardware we get higher resolutions and more frame rate. But that doesn't, I mean, obviously that's not what they did. So for people
according to a lot of YouTubers, the Switch Pro has been out for years, apparently. I don't know. It's seems like they've been saying it's coming out for years and it still hasn't happened. So
I think they're still saying.
Sure
I think that's coming back around too. I've been seeing that the Switch Pro.
Oh, good.
Then it was the Switch Pro, and then the OLED came out, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's what we meant."
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll just have to wait for like 10 to 15 years when we get the game remastered on the next system, and it'll finally run better or something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But
it's a little bit of a bummer.
From playing the game, I will say some of the things that stand out to me that are like kind of turn-offs or things they just didn't fix from the first game. It does get crunchy with like the dynamic resolution when you're running around in the grass or you're in just areas with a lot of foliage. The res, I don't know the technical side, maybe we're at 500p or something. We're below HD, which is crazy. In 2023 we're playing games that drop below HD.
In the docked TV mode?
Not in the docked TV mode. I'm assuming in the docked TV mode, maybe you're dropping to 720p, but even still,
720p is the new 480i, frankly, in this day and age.
Right, the 480i, and that's I think what the Wii U tablet is 480i.
Yeah, and people complained about that back in the day in like 2012. So
yeah. But it gets crunchy. It does get crunchy, and I'm hoping with this patch that they're talking about, reviewers are talking about right now, they're incorporating AMD FSR, which what that'll essentially do is when it's at lower resolutions, it'll be upscaling with sort of like an anti-aliasing. Because that's what the thing is. Nintendo games, I think, since the beginning of the Switch, there's been no anti-aliasing. it's just jaggies the whole time you're playing it, which is insane. Like, it's insane how they still haven't figured that out at the Nintendo HQ. But
Yeah, it's not great because, like I said, it's like you're playing something that is better than it is being allowed to be because of the hardware.
mhm.
And Nintendo used to have a good excuse for that though, because like their game systems used to be crazy ways to play. You know, the Wii. Hey, the Wii is not the same resolution or as powerful as the other ones, but you have this like crazy new way to play. So it's like, okay, it's kind of okay because this is fun. But with the Switch, it's like there's really no new way to play. This is kind of, it's weird because like you could definitely say Tears of the Kingdom would be better to play on an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Oh, for
But
sure.
like how would it not be better to just play it on those?
Oh, for sure.
So
You're right. In previous
yeah.
games, you couldn't always say that. You couldn't say
Right.
Wind Waker would have been better on the PS2. Skyward
Right.
Sword would have been better on an Xbox Connect. No one was saying that. Um,
Esports on the Xbox 360. It's like, well, that would suck and not work. Like, why would you do that? Um,
but one hot take I will say, I will make this hot take.
let's hear the hot
This
take.
this game has the best looking clouds in any game I've ever played.
Okay, that's exciting. I do like clouds. I like the sky.
The best
That's good news.
looking clouds. They and I feel like other games that have good clouds, if you really uh are taking a look specifically at the clouds, I don't know, like Red Dead 2, that's a game that has really good looking clouds, but this one they do have like a volumetric quality when you're sort of there's a lot of instances where you're jumping off of one of the sky islands and you're kind of going past the clouds, and the clouds are kind of like the marker of like, here, now you're on the surface. When you're above the clouds, you're in the sky map. So doing that and going through these high density clouds, no load screens, by the way. You can jump from a sky island, go straight down, even into the depths of the tunnels, which I'll get to too. There's another layer even below the surface. The game manages to do this all without any sort of load screens, and honestly, little to no frame drops, which was surprising. But the clouds, and even something I noticed, and I looked back to check this with the first Breath of the Wild game, the clouds now impact the direct lighting on Link in the environment. Like, I was just
Hmm.
walking around and suddenly it just got dark. I looked up, a cloud was passing the sun. The clouds did not interact with the sun like that in the first game. So that alone is actually a really, really big graphical improvement that I'm surprised they were even able to push that on the Switch. You look at
I,
go ahead.
is that not in Breath of the Wild? Because I do remember seeing like the clouds on the ground, like the shadow of clouds on the ground in that game.
I don't think they didn't sync up with like the actual physical clouds in the sky because
Okay, okay,
yeah,
I see what you mean.
this one they're like genuine objects, whereas in the
Okay.
first game they were more like, like a skybox, like an image that's wrapped around. But this one, because
Hmm.
you're interacting with the sky, you're going up into the sky, and even when you're on the ground, I don't know how much of this they show in the trailers, but you can see the silhouettes of sky islands like through the clouds at all times. And that's another thing. Just speaking specifically about the technical side of the game, clouds, amazing. The fact that you can go from the top of the map to the bottom of the map with no stutter, no load times, and then also um, the render distance. And this was something with the first game too. I never noticed with that game pop-ins. You see a lot of Switch games now, they try to do the thing where this object's out of range, so we're going to put it at 2 FPS, and then when you get close, finally you'll get the 30 FPS. Wow.
Right.
Oh boy.
Little stop motion characters in the background.
Right. That none of that. I've stood in one spot in the game and looked off into the distance and seen like a soldier, a Hylian soldier walking by with full frame rate, clouds in the distance, full frame rate. Everything you see is in full frame rate, and not only was the render distance good in the first game for a Switch game, you're getting also all the sky islands are populating while you're riding around on your horse or you're on your Zonai contraption soaring around. Nothing's rendering out. I know they're doing some tricks with what you're not looking at. I'm sure behind you is rendering out, but everything in sight on your screen is there at all times. And that honestly was, I almost expected them to do sort of a thing where when you're in the sky, you're in the sky, and then sort of like do a little cheap little, oh, you went through a cloud and now the surface is loading sort of thing. But no, it's all genuinely there at all times.
Pretty good. I mean, Fortnite runs on Switch as well. It's somewhat of a similar setup, right? Jumping from the sky and...
I guess I think you have more experience with Fortnite on the Switch than I do.
That could be. But I'm curious if there's going to be like a lot of islands in the sky, or if it's just kind of like what's the difference between the sky? Are like the sky islands populated by anybody?
Yeah. So the sky islands, basically, you know how you have Rito Village, you have the Rito Birds, you have the Goron Valley, you have the Gorons, you have what are the water ones called?
Zoras?
The Zoras. The Zora's Domain. The Sky Islands, you have the Zonai. So it's like a new race of NPC that basically they're like these ancient relics, and they only sort of came back when this whole thing happened with the castle going up into the sky. It kind of pulled like all these sky islands up into the sky. So now you have these Zonai, which are basically, they're pretty similar to, what were the techie robo androidy thing enemies in the first game? I can't remember what they were called, but you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The you mean like the giant beasts?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like this game's version of that. So like some of them are kind of protecting the sky islands. There's some that are friendly towards you that are more like and you'll see them genuinely like interacting with the environment, chopping wood, cooking, like doing legit things. And then there'll be some that are like the defender Zonai, and they'll attack you, and it's sort of like when you defeat them, they drop like a Zonai battery, Zonai items that you can then fuse to make stuff that like futuristic-y, like ancient kind of stuff they did with the first Breath of the Wild. That's the sky. The sky is this ancient, future-y sort of sky zone that's different, drops different. There's not the same mushrooms, there's not the same trees, there's not the same enemies. It's completely different from the surface, and that's where you start out in the game. And the size of the sky, it takes up the entire... When you look at the map, and you see the map of the surface, the same as it was in the first game, you then can push up on the D-pad and see the map of the sky. It takes up that same exact scope. The sky islands go across the entirety of the map.
But is there like a good variety in size? Are there some that are like little dinky floating islands with something little on it?
Exactly, yeah. It's almost kind of like a Mario Galaxy type thing. Like you might stray off and there's this little like, oh, I didn't even notice that little planetoid like off to the side. A lot of things, and a lot of them like, oh, maybe you only can access this one, kind of in like classic Zelda fashion, like, oh, now I have this ability, I bet I can go back to the sky island, and I saw that little one off to the corner when I was helping this dude, and then you can go there, like once you have the hang glider, you can go to this little one off to the side, and there'll be a chest, or there'll be like a Korok or something like that, which those are back again too. But yeah, and then there's some islands that are just massive, and there's like mine shafts and tall mountains up in the sky. Like even when you're in the sky, you can even go even higher than that. There's mountains up in the sky island. So when they sort of advertise that, it's legit.
The sky islands have various like what's the word I'm gonna say? Like are there snow and autumn and like summer, or
there is
all the same?
There's snow. You'll have to find ways to overcome the snow, like whether it's like clothing or you cook up some peppers or whatever.
So how does snow fall on an island that's above the clouds?
It's not, you don't really see it falling. It's more like it's just frozen. That's a great question for the devs. I didn't even think about that either. I didn't think about that. But I feel like even when you're in the sky, there's still clouds above you too. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
You're
okay.
kind of like amidst them. And there's even different elevations. Like there's some sky islands that are way up higher above the rest that I don't even know how I'm gonna get to yet. But does this game have a day-night cycle? Yes, Loves to Spoon. This game has a day-night cycle, just like the first game. And that, again, like the first game, beautiful. The sunsets in the first game, walking through blades of grass and watching them cast shadows while the red sun flares are coming on your like, it looks great. It's eye candy for sure. For as much as I can say for a Switch game, but
They still do the blood moon thing in order to respawn enemies.
they still do the blood moon thing. And I have a theory about the blood moon I haven't got to test yet. I think the blood moon, and you've asked me about this before about the Zonai devices, how like can you store them, can you save them? I'm pretty sure the Zonai devices you create are reset during the blood moon. I'm almost
Okay.
positive. But they do, like, you can stray off, like almost like in the first game, like you leave your horse somewhere and you travel across the map. You still see where your horse is on the map. You go back there, your horse is there. It's kind of like that. You can leave an area. You can fast travel, leave an area, fast travel back. If you built something there, it's still there as long as it's within that blood moon cycle.
Okay. When Link goes through the when Link falls through the clouds, does he get wet? 'Cause if not, this game is really dumb because he should be wet when he falls through those clouds.
His cheeks get wet and his little sneakies get wet. No,
Oh my god.
he doesn't get wet. He doesn't actually. Even when he goes in the water, he doesn't get wet. To be honest with you, does he? Maybe like little
Not like
droplets
he
come
doesn't
off,
look
but
wet.
I don't remember him. I don't think when he goes in the water and comes out, I don't think he drips or anything.
Can't dive under the water, right?
No, and you couldn't do that in the first one, right?
No, you couldn't. That was one of the things I was hoping they'd let us do, like swim under the water, because that would be a good way of putting more things to do in the same map.
You're right.
But
And it kind of goes along the lines of like, hey, we have the same map, but there's another layer to it. There's the sky. Oh, now there's the sea. I don't know. We gotta wait till the third Breath of the Wild to get the ocean and the diving and stuff. That would be really cool. And I could almost see like you have to sort of like configure a little Zonai device so you can breathe underwater. And then like when you're underwater, you can find like different materials that you can then fuse. Because that's another huge thing about this game is like fusing materials and fusing like kind of creating weapons, which I think is something they really missed the mark on with the first game. With they have the items break, but once you find your favorite items, you're going back to the spawns and you're just getting the same items over and over again. It's just an annoyance and a chore that they break. With this game, it's like, okay, my weapon broke. What do I have in my inventory? Oh, I have this part from this boss I beat. I have this traveler's claymore that I found at one of the villages. And then when you're putting them together, you're genuinely creating like these unique, one-of-a-kind things. It's not like it goes to some like boilerplate. When you fuse a shiny thing with this, it turns into that. Like it's based on the size, the shape of the object. It's actually like pretty advanced. So that, and go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, with the first game, they wanted the weapons to break because they had so many weapons, and they wanted you to experiment with all of them. And you know, like you said, one of the things most people do is you kind of find the ones you like, and then you don't really experiment anymore. But if you're fusing things and changing the weapons like that, and I think they're kind of achieving their original goal with the first game, you would want to keep, checking stuff out.
I think so. And I think along the lines of what you were asking me the other day, like, does this game replace Breath of the Wild? I think it very much does, because I think I know I used like Mario Galaxy 2 compared to Galaxy 1 in the past. I mean, that's not the best example because they both are great standalone games. It's not like, oh, because this one has Yoshi, I don't want to go back and play the first game. But with this one, it's like almost like quality of life things, like the fusing the weapons, being able to like just impromptu like fashion together something when something breaks, and it actually gives a meaning to like the loot that bosses drop. Like sometimes in the first game, it's like I see a Hinox, I don't need to fight that Hinox. I'm gonna break 2 weapons, and then what? I get 2 toenails when he dies. Like it's so silly. You just avoid them. But in this one, it's like
Mm.
I can make a toenail shield, or like something, like, you know what I mean? Like you can make shit, and you don't even know what you're gonna make. Like when you fuse things, you could fuse a it's kind of like you have the base of it, so you have like a wooden stick, and then you fuse that with a blade type thing, or a hammer type thing, or like a club, and then those two things come together, and it's different every time. Like it's never the same unless you're fusing the same two materials, which I think is one of the coolest things they did in this game.
Do the enemies fuse things together for their weapons?
They do, and then they'll drop them, and you'll be like, how the hell did they make this? And you'll take a
Oh,
look,
that's
and
cool.
when you take it out and equip it physically, you're like, okay, so this is like a sturdy stick with, and there's a game we're gonna play later, so I don't want to give this feature away. I'm gonna use that in there, but no, they fuse things together. The enemies are smarter. Speaking of the enemies, they're smarter than they were in the first game. They even have little, like, there'll be like a boss moblin with like little moblin minions following, like almost like marching like through the land. Like they're not, in the first game it was like you'd stumble across a little skull-shaped cave and there'd be moblins in it, or there'd be like a little forest area and you'd know, oh, moblins spawn there. But they can just be like sort of like scouting out areas. Like you'll just see little moblin armies kind of like actually like doing stuff, actually interacting with the environment, which I think just as far as replayability with this game, it's going to add a lot, especially when I'm sure they have the masks back and you can kind of goof around and like put a moblin mask on and see, oh, what the fuck do they do when they're out searching the cave or whatever. Like I think that's really cool. They definitely improved upon that.
Do the enemies, because I think they showed this in one of the trailers, do the enemies make their own little vehicles as well?
That I haven't seen yet, but there is an enemy that has sort of like Link's ability to like move physics objects and like pick shit up and throw it at you, kind of. I haven't seen them make their own vehicles, but that's something I think they do really well in the shrines. A lot of the puzzles in the shrines are like, okay, in this room there's this base wooden plank, and then in this room there's like almost like the top part of like a hot air balloon, and then, oh, if I take this and I light this on fire and put it there, it's gonna make the hot air balloon rise, and I can put the little ball on there and then get it over to from point A to point B. Like a lot of them are kind of just like, here's 6 things, put something together and solve this puzzle. So, and on shrines, I think what they did with this game, shrines are still there. Like same concept as the last game. You collect the 4 orbs, then you get your heart piece or your stamina vessel. But a lot of times I've seen in the story, there's not necessarily dungeons, but there's almost like sky islands that are kind of a little separated from the rest, that lead up to a boss and are kind of like this game's equivalent of dungeons. And the shrines are almost like checkpoints to get back, because when you like scan a shrine and open it, you can teleport back to it. So I think that's a nice feature. I can't remember. I feel like they didn't really have that in the first game. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I can't remember. I never finished all the shrines in the first game, so I'm not a shrine expert, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think if you didn't finish them in the first game, I didn't either. I don't think I'll finish them all in this game. There's not a real incentive, except like I don't have to eat food as often when I take damage, because I have more heart pieces. And even stamina, I think, matters a lot less in this game because of the ability where you can kind of shoot up through the ground. I don't know if you've seen that one in the trailers.
Yeah, is it one of the rockets, or is it just an ability Link has?
So there are rockets, which are they're pretty freaking cool because they're devices, and I'm sure once everyone gets the game, the shit people are gonna make is actually gonna be pretty insane. But that's actually an ability Link gets. It's kind of like Link Between Worlds on the 3DS, where you're like traversing one plane and you're like, I guess it's a little different than that, but say there's a mountain with a cave in it, you can go inside that cave, and then because you're underneath a mountain, you can then use that and sort of like swim up through through the mountain and come up on top without having to sit there and like monotonously climb while eating like stamina shrooms or whatever. So I think that's done better. It's less about like climbing. Like you just have more options. You just have a lot more options in this game.
Is it possible to attach a rocket to an enemy to get it to fly off into the sky away from you?
You can pick up enemy. So they, as far as I understand, enemies are also like physics objects. Like you can pick them up and like manipulate them. So I'm pretty sure you could technically attach a rocket to one. I'd have to try it. Pretty sure you could do it. Like you could. There's one mission where there was like a Korok seed, little, almost like a little. It was more than like a normal Korok seed, and there was this dude who got like separated from his little Korok buddy, and you can pick him up, put him inside a minecart, attach a fan to the back of the minecart, and then blow him like up this tunnel so that he gets to his friend. Like there's little things like that where it's like you can do quite a bit, whether it's the rockets, there's the fans that can push things, and there's kind of like the sails for little sailboats. You can attach that to shit. Like, and I probably have only seen like half of it, not even. But I think people will have a lot of fun with that stuff for sure.
It's like the entire game is basically made around what they saw people were doing on like Twitter, what the audience was doing. Maybe they didn't even know, the developers couldn't even know some of these things could happen. So they're just like, let's make a sequel that just really caters to that kind of demographic.
Right, yeah, because people would do that stuff where they like stand on something, and there was that one ability where you could like pick it up while you were on top of it and like throw yourself across the map. But what else did I want to touch on? So Josh, all right, here's a question. So, given that you like coordinate your underpants based on season, you're a very season-oriented person. You won't play Mario Sunshine if it's like below 70 degrees. Is Zelda a summer game? And then I have a follow-up question. But first, is Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom? Can you play it? Are you allowed to with your religion? Is it culturally insensitive? Like what is it? Oh, you're muted, by the way.
I know I was muted. Yeah, you could play Zelda. Wait, which Zelda game in the summer?
The one coming out.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can't go to the winter areas in the summer, obviously. But those are banned. Come on.
That was
Be a
my
savage.
follow-up question.
So that's the cool thing about Breath of the Wild, though. Like, it's a game that I play all year round. In the summer, I go to like the summery areas. In the winter, I'll go to the snowy areas. And in the Halloween season, I go to like, what was it, Akala, someplace. I think it's called Akala. I'll go there when it's Halloween season. So that's one of the things that works best about the game.
It's gonna take you a full year to see the whole game, but
Well, I guess I'll play through some of the areas the first time, but then I'll like get the hell out of there real quick.
yeah. But yeah, a lot of those villages, the one, the tropical one, I know you really like. That one is at least rumored by like the NPCs to be still existing. It doesn't seem like this game's like post-apocalyptic and everything's destroyed. It's more just like, oh, now there's these sky things and like the castles in the sky, so everything's kind of intact. Seems like all the villages, like I've seen Rito Village and Kakariko Village. Those are the ones I've seen so far, and they're different, and it's cool because you can visit them, and it's almost like they're taking advantage of the fact that this is a Zelda game that's a direct sequel from another one, like kind of how they did with like, well, I guess they didn't really do it with Majora's Mask, but they definitely did that with some Zelda games in the past, where it's like, oh, that's what this looks like now, or I guess like Ocarina of Time with the future and the time traveling and stuff like that. It kind of has that vibe.
What are the differences in Kakariko Village?
The
A major or?
differences, that one I can't really answer too well because I only saw that one because my brother's also playing the game and he got there. I haven't been there yet. He got there and I saw it accidentally looking at his screen, so I can confirm.
Is it like the
there.
first game where you can? Is it like the first game where you could just kind of technically, like, if I wanted to start this game and make a dash right to Lurlin Village, You do that? Does it, or is it like you need to do stuff first before you really kind of get the freedom to go wherever you want?
No, you definitely can. You 100% can. You can make a dash wherever you want to. Like, even
That's what I'm doing.
even when I got
Right to
to
Lurlin Village.
avoid, and I know you gotta avoid the snow. Um, yeah, if you want to avoid the snow, Rito is like all snow now. But even when I was going to the Rito village, it felt like, oh, like, is this even where I'm supposed to be going? Like, I know I can technically get here, but this was quite a chore. Like, it's not easy to get to these places because maybe there's big gaps, and then there's like, like those enemies from the first game that are like centaurs. Like, I can't face one of those yet, but just the traversal and like the environmental hazards that's the only thing stopping you. It's not, the game's not telling you can't go here. I'm pretty sure you can go wherever the hell you want, and I like that.
Okay.
And one difference from the first game that I think they did well is kind of in that same vein of like freedom and choice. In the first game, you can go and defeat Ganon from the beginning of the game, and I think that's an interesting concept. It's cool because technically, you know, the better route is to go and get all the abilities and beat shrines so you can level yourself up and then face him. But there was no mystery to it, you know, like, oh, I go here, that's the main threat, I beat that, and that's the end of the game. It kind of took out some of the mystery for me. With this game, it's not like there's this entity here, if I kill this, then I've technically like just rolled the credits. It's more like the story's more vague. It's like Zelda's lost, she's not kidnapped, she's being seen in different places. Like, there might be 4 different points on the map, and one NPC's like, oh, I saw her here, oh, I saw her there, and then you go there and you interact with the NPCs there, and then you're on this quest, and oh, I saw her up in this cloud, and then you're up in the Sky Island. So there's not, it's just more like ambiguity. As far as like, sometimes I'm like, is this a side quest or is this a main mission? Because a lot, like, there's so much fleshed out. There's even side quest NPCs, and it's the same with the first game, but they're very, very fleshed out. And because there's not a clear, this is where Ganon is, defeat him, sometimes like, it's like, oh, maybe this little thing, if I do this here and help this person out, maybe this is actually progressing me forward. So I think that's really cool.
How is Ganon a threat? Other than looking scary, what is he doing to threaten Hyrule?
Honestly, like, as far as I am, it seems like that's kind of a mystery too, because there's like the opening cutscene, you see the mummified Ganon when you're like doing archaeological research in like the underground section of Hyrule, and then he kind of just wakes up and starts talking to you, shouting at you, and then you kind of black out and you're in the Sky Islands as Link, and then you're just getting these little messages and like illusions and mirages of Zelda, like, as you're like progressing. So it's kind of that he's risen back to power, and now the Moblins are back. That's kind of like his threat, but it's unclear as to like where he really is. Like, I think maybe he's in the castle. I'm assuming he's in the castle, but it's definitely not something where like I can just fly to that castle and kill Ganon. Like, it's definitely not that.
What stops you from flying to the castle and killing Ganon in this?
There's this kind of like that red matter stuff that's in the trailer. When you touch that, essentially, it not only damages you, but it breaks your hearts. So that if you're getting damaged by that, you can't just go into your inventory and eat 7 apples and get your health back. You don't get that health back until you die and respawn. So like, you pretty much just die by touching it. So there has to be something eventually in the story where you figure out how to get rid of that shit.
Okay, I see.
But
Sure.
yeah, definitely same freedom as the first game. A lot of things you can just discover on your own. But yeah. Okay, so now I want to get to a little game, and then if there's any viewer questions, we'll do those.
Okay.
So I'm gonna list some features or gameplay elements, qualities in this Zelda game, and then you just have to guess if they're there or not. True or false.
Okay.
All right. So the first one, you can customize your shoes by fusing them with materials that you gather.
This is gonna be a not true, and you're just trying to pander to me. You know that I would want that, so I'm gonna say there is not shoe customization in this game. False.
As far as I know. As far as I know. But you know, maybe if the
Okay,
devs were really going off of like fan feedback and they stumbled across one of your videos, maybe that's something
might have
little.
got my 10,000 emails. I might have got my requests.
So the next one, and I don't know how well these are gonna play out. If it's gonna be mad obvious that they're whatever. I don't even know what was in the trailers and what wasn't. I kind of stayed
Okay.
away from that stuff. But when fusing your weapons with materials, the shape and size of the material you're fusing with. Sorry, this is probably so stupid. The shape and size of the material you're fusing with actually impacts the uniqueness and its like visual appearance and functionality.
So based on what they showed so far, I'm gonna say that's probably false because Link took a huge boulder and put it on a little stick, a branch, and the boulder shrunk down to be the size of the branch.
It okay,
So false. False.
you're right. They do shrink a little, like it, but the boulders you confuse with actually typically aren't that big of boulders. I don't know what they showed in that trailer, but no, 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 no. There's different types of rocks. Like if you see a rock that's more of like a flat shape, and then you fuse that with your stick, you might get an axe. You might get a hoe or like a shovel, or a club like,
Okay.
or you take like one of those giant boulders and put that onto a staff, and then you have something functionally that's actually different because only like the clubs and things you can use to like mine and like get ore, and then there's only the axes really you can like chop a tree down. So you can kind of like create, like if you see a stone that looks kind of like the head of like an axe, you want to like jump on that and make sure you have a stick and fuse that with that, because you might not even see, they don't come around too often. So, and it like just directly like when you fuse it, it looks just like it did laying in front of you, but now on your weapon. I think that's really cool. So yeah, that one is true. I didn't know if because
Okay.
it was so oddly specific, it would be like clear, like, oh, that's obviously in the fucking game. But
No, because based on what they've shown, I would not have assumed that would be the case. Aren't there just axes in the game though? Isn't there just like an axe in the game?
yeah, you could stumble across one that's made, but it is still, when you stumble across that, it's the equivalent of like it is an object that's fused. Like it is, you could technically pick that up
Does
and
it
then
look different?
unfuse. No, like every axe in the game is a stick that's fused with a rock. You get what I'm
Okay,
saying?
but like in Breath of the Wild, there was like a woodcutter's axe. Is that not in the game anymore? Like, did they just take that out because you just make your own axe now?
Yeah, that's not in the game for what I've seen. But when you
Okay.
but when you make an axe, the name of the title of that might become like woodcutter's axe, because the title of like the weapon
Okay.
does change. Um, so yeah, no, you'll stumble across stuff. You'll be like, oh, I didn't even realize I could like fuse and make that, which is pretty cool. The other two questions I had, we already talked about. One of them was like true or false. Can you just get to Ganon from the start of the game? And then the other one was about like the Zonai creations and whether or not they like remain intact when you travel away, which they do until it's a blood moon, which is, I think that's dope. I was surprised at, I thought I was going to come back to an area and that shit was going to be gone, you know what I mean?
Hmm. Does it seem like there's much of a point to making like a vehicle of some kind other than, haha, look, I made a like, here's something. Like, once you've played this game 50 hours, are you going to care to still make vehicles, or will you be like, screw that, I'm just going to fast travel to the other point?
Um yeah, I think like the thing with the game is you can play it as if it's Breath of the Wild. You can hop on your horse and travel. You can just go on top of a high point and then glide. You can literally, if you don't want to use the Zonai stuff, there's nothing in the game, and I could be wrong. Maybe something potentially down the line is forcing you to use it. There's a couple things in the tutorial where, like, because you don't have the hang glider yet, you don't have a horse yet, you do need to create these little Zonai creations, and it kind of like teaches you the fundamentals of it. But I don't see myself making. I mean, maybe I'm the type of person. Maybe when I beat the game, then I'll go and goof around and make little Zonai shit. But as I'm just playing through the game, I don't have like a desire to like make some contraption to like. I'll just call my horse and get on my horse, or I'll just travel to a sky island and then glide down from that sky island and land where I want to. But then you're using your
Yeah.
stamina. Whereas if you're using a Zonai device, you're using like your battery charges, they're called, and like that affects the length at which that like the duration the fan will blow, the duration the flame will emit from the whatever you made. So it's kind of just like managing, like, do I want to glide and use stamina? Do I want to use my horse? Do I want to create something and travel? But then like maybe someone's figured this out, but like when you make a Zonai thing, how do you fucking steer it? Like it just goes straight. So like I don't know. Maybe that's not
There's a
something I
little
can answer yet.
throttle thing. I think there's a little throttle thing to move them. I
Oh,
think I've seen that in some gameplay.
yeah, that hasn't been exposed to me yet, so I haven't gotten any sort of like throttle. That'd be cool. Maybe I think once like I get deep into the game and like I've beaten it, that'll be the thing I go back and goof around with. Like, oh, like what can I possibly make? I think that would be cool.
Mm.
But you're mostly me personally. I'm mostly using it in the shrines to like solve puzzles, and I think that's fun. I think that's cool. But when I have
Are the shrines in the same spot as the first game?
no, nah, they're
Did they
not.
move those?
They're not because they're not
Okay.
like Sheikah shrines anymore. They're like Zonai shrines, and they're in different spots. So it's not like, and even the map, like I'm not even going to places in the map, and I'm like, oh, I remember this cliffside. I remember like it's different. Like it's the same landmark. It's almost like every Zelda game. Like yeah, sure, there's Lon Lon Ranch in this game and then in that game, but it's not the same map. You know what I mean? Like that's how it feels. Like they're in the same general locations. Like this one's northeast, this one, but the map itself, I'm not finding shit and like having deja vu at all. Um, but yeah, no, the Zonai stuff's cool. I think some people will like it more than others. Some people will just kind of like if you have the resources available to you. Like when I'm in a shrine, I'll use the Zonai. When I'm out in the overworld, like I'll just get on my horse. But I think the game's a lot of fun. I think you'll like it, Josh. It's enough. I think it's enough to where it'll bring you back in if you want to goof around and be creative and try the new abilities. Um, it replaces Breath of the Wild. Like if you're gonna play Breath of the Wild, you're gonna play Tears of the Kingdom.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if it's just Breath of the Wild with more, then you probably would want to play the with more. For me, it's just like whether or not that's going to be something I can respect that they took longer to make this game than any other Zelda title. And yet, at the end of the day, it's just kind of like Breath of the Wild plus. So I'm going to have to see how much I feel it really has changed or revolutionized things. So far, having not played it, I do feel a little bit kind of like, okay, right, I guess I'll get it. But I'm not like hyped like I
No,
usually am for Zelda.
yeah, no, I don't think there's any reason to be hyped. I think it's really good. I think it's what you expect. It's what you expect when they're telling you it's the Zelda, but there's more shit to discover. So if the Sky Islands like really like sell it for you, then you're gonna love the game. I think the Sky Islands are dope. Um, but yeah, we're just gonna do some viewer questions now. Josh, I appreciate your
Okay.
time. Um,
Anytime, buddy.
appreciate you. Let's see. So, do you think this new game has a lot of replayability? Yes, I think it has a lot of replayability. The first game, which I know you haven't played V, but the first game had a ton of replayability. I know me and Josh, you probably put what 100 hours plus into that game, probably more.
Mine's at like 1,000. Mine's at like a
Yeah,
thousand.
yeah, probably.
So
Yeah, like one of the most replayable games, definitely the most replayable game on the Switch. Um, I was wondering what that mattered to you. Have you been able to go into one of the water orbs? Like, what are those for? I thought those were pretty cool. The water orbs? Oh, the
and
water
one of the
orbs in the
trailers, Link's
trailer.
swimming in a water orb.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of Mario Galaxy. I haven't done that yet. I'm assuming that's sort of like the dungeon equivalent in the Zora domain just by looking at it. So, not close to that yet, but that seems pretty fucking cool. I mean, any ideas from Mario Galaxy are gonna be cool. That's a really good game. Should I play Breath of the Wild story only then Jumo? Is that Spanish? What? Only then jump into the game. Sorry, I never played. Blah, blah, blah. No, you don't need anything from the first story. I mean, every story is just like Ganon's bad, and um,
First game barely had a story, Breath of the Wild.
yeah, this game's more like Mario movie syndrome, where it's like Ganon's bad, but like Zelda, she's don't worry, guys, she's not injured. She's a strong, independent woman. She's coming back, and she's
Well, thank
she's doing her
God.
archaeological research and like giving you little tips and stuff. Like, don't worry, guys. Like, she obviously couldn't be held captive by Ganon. That's never happened before. So, um,
He kills Ganon in the end of this game.
I'm sure she does. She probably does. And then Link like proposes to her, and she
He says,
fucking knocks.
"Nope,
Yeah, yeah,
need no man in my life. I'm a princess."
yeah. No, I'm curious. I'm curious because Zelda is definitely more prominent in this story. Like in the first one, it was like like flashbacks to her and like we want to rescue her or whatever, right? Did we want to rescue her? What was her deal? I don't even remember what her deal was in the
He was
first
like
game.
trapped in the her spirit was like trapped in the castle or something.
Oh yeah, something
The
like
first
that.
game story was very not great.
Yeah, and I think that's again like the story was just simple because you could beat the game so easily. Like you didn't need to go and like gather. Like this one has more, not necessarily like story regarding like Zelda and Ganon, but like just like the world, like kind of figuring out the world story, which I think is done a little better here. And it's not all done through flashbacks. It's done through like you actually encounter these people. Oh, and another thing, you get little sidekicks on some of the missions. Like you'll have like a little Rito guy that'll follow you and like blow gusts of wind. And I'm sure the same goes for like Gorons. I'm sure you get like a little Goron sidekick. That's a cool feature. I think that's cool. I don't think that's even been done before, except for like Midna, like the little fairies that you have in the other games.
Wind Waker.
Oh yeah, you're
So
right,
there's a couple moments in Wind Waker.
but definitely not in the first Breath of the Wild. So that's cool to see back. Because all like the main characters from the first game are like they're not there. You're just remembering them. But this time it's like oh, like they're here. So that's cool. How can a game be a sequel, but you can skip it and go straight to this one? It's a sequel in the sense that like with Zelda games, most of them you're starting from scratch, new Link, new Zelda. This is a direct sequel. It's the same world, it's the same Link, it's the same Zelda, same Ganon question mark, I think, essentially. Um you don't need to know the story from the first game because this story is independent. Um there are going to be times where if you do have some experience with like the characters, you'd be like, "Oh, I remember that." Josh, after hearing some of the feedback on the game from Minaj, are you excited about the game? Just curious since you did a review a few weeks ago on it. It's a question for you, Josh.
What game?
After hearing some feedback about the Tears of the Kingdom, after our discussion today, are you excited for the game, or are you pretty much just like where you were at 2 weeks
I think
ago?
I'm kind of where I'm. I think I'm kind of where I'm at. I'm gonna take your word for it and assume that Link can get shiny shoes, and so that gets me excited now.
Don't take my
You got to
don't
go to
take my word on
Hateno
that.
Village. You got to go to Hateno Village because I think you told me that that's like where the style is. That's where all the cool style is. Um,
Yeah,
Lorland Village is not destroyed. That makes me very happy. I was worried. It's my happy place. Um, I think it's weird because it's like I've never seen a situation like this where it's this sequel to one of my favorite video games of all time. I'm also just kind of like, oh yeah, cool, that's coming out in a few days. I guess I'll get that then. Whereas with Pikmin 4, I'm like, counting down the seconds, analyzing every little leaf in the trailer.
no, that's
Um,
true.
but yeah, I don't think it's going to be disappointing to me because I kind of know what it is. And I think a lot of people, we've kind of known what it is. And I think a lot of people want more Breath of the Wild. And I guess there's nothing wrong with wanting more of one of the best games of all time. But, it's kind of like with Breath of the Wild, playing it was sort of where you get your joy. So I think it's just one of those games you got to play in order to totally get. So
Yeah,
I mean, not more hyped, but equally hyped,
yeah.
kind
No,
of
I hear
right
you.
in here.
Because I was even looking back on your video you did like what, like 3 years ago about the things you're looking forward to in the next Zelda game, and I'm like, I knew Josh loved Breath of the Wild, but in that video you were referring to it as one of your favorite games of all time, and I was like, he doesn't seem that excited about this. But no, I mean, your point's valid. Your point's valid. Like, X game could be my favorite game of all time, but if they make that game again, but there's more, I'm gonna like it as much as I liked the original. But even with it being 2023, you played that game in what, 2017, 2018, 2016?
Mm.
Shit. Um,
I think the game being the same visual style with a lot of the same animations, a lot of the same little sound effects, that stuff kind of holds it back for me. You know, if it was like a totally different art style, that would probably make me more excited. You know, like Pikmin 2 is my favorite video game of all time. And then Pikmin 3 came out, we got Pikmin 4, but I think I still look at Pikmin 2 as being my favorite, even though 3 and 4 might have done some better things, because it was just like so much more original. Pikmin 2, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
can add to things, but that doesn't necessarily make it better because you're not getting that same rush of so many things being new and fresh that you had originally.
yeah, I hear
Capturing
you.
lightning in a bottle twice, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they did was they had a game that I think it had like a huge impact on the industry. I mean, one of the best grossing games right now is that Genshin Impact. I tried playing, I couldn't get into, but I feel like a lot of copycat games kind of sprouted from Breath of the Wild, and they were like, "Shit,
Yeah.
we figured it out. We figured out this is our sauce. This is the art style we're gonna do. This is probably the most we can do on the Switch." It's really an art style that's kind
Mm,
of like forgiving to hardware because of the cell shading and stuff like that.
yeah.
Whereas like it wouldn't have aged as well if they tried to do like a gritty Twilight Princess, or like even the game they showed when they were first like, hey, we're making a Wii U Zelda game, like that kind of thing. And I think that's something they're good at, making games that age well. The game will age well. The first one will age well. Um, but yeah, no, that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for all your questions, everybody. Josh, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. Before we wrap this up, any preview you want to give for Breath of the Wild, fucking Tears of the Kingdom content?
Listen, nobody calls it Tears of the Kingdom for some reason.
They don't.
I'm talking like two other friends keep saying Breath of the Wild. I
I
can't get Tears of the Kingdom as my default name for this game.
it doesn't it doesn't flow off the tongue. But even when Breath of the Wild came out, I feel like people were like, that's a kind of a weird Zelda name. But
I think I was always on board with Breath of the Wild. I was always kind of like, "Oh, hello there. That's a nice little name," and I've never forgot it. But yeah, for some reason, Tears of the Kingdom just sounds hard. Maybe it's because it starts with like a T, like tears. I don't know. But oh, as far as stuff I'm gonna do, I think I'm gonna do a little video journal, monkeying around in the game, messing around, getting into some trouble, blowing up things. A little journal series, and then probably gonna take me a while before I get around to a review because this is a difficult game to review. It takes like a month of playing before I'll be able to be like, okay, this is what I think. You know?
so we can expect a
But
review.
I think I'll do a review eventually. Yeah, maybe like a first impressions and then the review later down the road. But more importantly, Corey Applesauce, what are you gonna do covering the game?
Gonna be doing some breakdown of the digital side of the game, like I was telling you. Taking a look at
Mm.
the frame rate, taking a look at the dynamic resolution, when's it dipping, kind of comparing it to the first game. Almost like a Digital Foundry esque video, but I'm gonna get mine out before they do, and hopefully do it justice as they would. And then also gonna be streaming the game when it's officially out, and doing a review. Those are the things I have in the works right now. It's nice to have this much time before the game launches to kind of get a head start on stuff. And I was glad to get this out. Glad you stopped and joined me so we can actually start making some content before we're really allowed to make content, um, and not just go off of trailers and uh, the old analysis machine. And actually, like, I'm playing the or I know someone that's playing the game. Uh, so no, thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate your time, guys. That's the BitBlock.
We
He's
we should do was gonna say we should do some kind of a collab where we come up with challenges for each other, like 5 challenges that you tell me to do. I'll get 5 that I have you do, and we'll see who can, actually complete more of them. That might be interesting.
Let's do it. No, I love it. And
I'm
that's a good idea. Yo, you're full of
gonna be
good
very
ideas, Josh.
devious with mine.
My challenge would be customize your shoes. All right, go fuck yourself.
Oh, I'll figure out a way. I'll figure out a way. Give me time.
But yep. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
Content
definitely.
coming soon from both of us, and that's it for the stream. So